The auction yard smelled of dust, sweat, and old regrets. The kind of place where men gathered not to hope but to forget. And Ezra Callahan had no business being there. Except that his horse had thrown a shoe and the blacksmith's shed stood just beyond the crowd. Yet fate has a way of stepping into a man's path when he least expects it. And Ezra, tall, weather-worn, carrying the quiet of a man who had buried too many dreams in dry Texas soil, heard the chant before he saw the platform. A sharp voice cutting through the heat as numbers were shouted like bullets. And when he turned, he saw her standing there. A young Chinese woman, no child but barely past 20, her wrists free yet her posture bound by fear, dressed in a simple blue cotton dress faded by travel and hardship, her black hair braided tight down her back, eyes lowered not in shame but in learned survival, and the sign beside her read, "Contract worker unclaimed?" Passage, which was how the territory disguised cruelty with paperwork, because she had been brought over to cook and clean for railroad. Men who vanished in a dispute, leaving her stranded, indebted, and now being auctioned not as a slave but as labor rights, a legal lie that made men feel clean as they bid on a human life. And Ezra's jaw tightened as he listened to the crowd laugh when the bidding stalled at $2. Someone shouting that she was too small, another saying she'd never last a winter, and Ezra felt the old burn in his chest. The same one that had driven him west after the war, after burying his brothers, after inheriting a ranch too big for one man and too quiet for a heart that refused to harden, and when the auctioneer sneered and called out, "Do I hear 3?" Ezra surprised himself by raising his hand. Not loud, not proud, just steady, the way a man lifts a fence post that must be set right, and the gavel fell fast, almost embarrassed, and suddenly the crowd was dispersing. Interest lost, as if nothing of consequence had occurred, but Ezra stood there holding a receipt that said he now owned her labor contract for $3, and when she finally looked up at him, her eyes were not grateful, not hopeful but sharp, measuring, as if she were asking what kind of man buys silence so cheaply, and Ezra cleared his throat, unused to explaining himself to anyone, and said simply that his name was Ezra Callahan and she was free to walk away if she wished, that he would tear the paper himself. And for the first time her composure cracked, not into tears but confusion, because freedom offered too easily feels like another trap, and she asked his name again slowly, her accent careful, and told him hers was Mei Lin, and that walking away meant starvation, jail or worse, and Ezra nodded, knowing the land well enough to understand that truth, and said then she could come to his ranch instead. Not as property, not as debt, but as a guest until she chose otherwise, and the words felt strange in his mouth because he had not hosted anyone since his wife died, giving birth to a son who never drew breath. And as they rode out, she on his spare horse, sitting stiff as a borrowed statue, Ezra noticed how she studied everything, the hills, the cattle, the way the wind bent the grass, as if memorizing a place she did not yet trust. And when they reached the ranch at dusk, a wide stretch of land most men would kill for, and Ezra barely tolerated, she stopped and stared, because she had expected a shack, not a horizon, and Ezra told her she could take the east cabin, the one with the stove that still worked, and that he would leave supplies and not bother her unless she asked. And when she asked why him, why kindness, Ezra answered honestly that he was tired of watching decent people get crushed while men with loud voices called it business. And that night, as the coyotes sang and the house creaked with old memories, Ezra sat alone at his table and realized that for the first time in years, the ranch did not feel empty. While in the cabin, Mei Lin sat awake long after the lamp burned low, holding the receipt he had torn in half and left on the table like a promise, wondering what kind of man gives away power when he has paid for it. And if you're listening to this story and feel that pull, the sense that one moment can change 2 lives forever, then don't let it pass you by, because stories like this unfold piece by piece. And the next chapter will reveal how a quiet act of mercy set fire to a destiny no one saw coming. So make sure you subscribe to the channel now, because what begins with $3 will soon cost everything and be worth far more than a ranch.